So in this section, we'll be discussing the reconstruction of the facial appearance. Now, why is it important to reconstruct the facial features, and why do we have to do that? First of all, basically, whenever we find a dead body, it can be a fresher body and it can be a decomposed or a skeletalized and a mummified, more decomposed, more putrefied body. So we have to get back to its identification, and we have to get on to its ancestry and the other characteristics, and for example, the identification of the person is really important in crime investigations. So we can find the dead body after a long period of time, it's skeletalized and a long period has gone by. Even then, we have to get back to its identification, who the person was, what was the sexing of the person, and where did he belong to. So this is basically the mainstay. If we basically reconstruct the facial characteristics, only then we'll get back to its identity, his or her identity. So it's very important to get back to that. In this section, we'll be discussing the methods of the reconstruction of the facial appearance, and why is it important to reconstruct the facial characteristics of a person, whether it is done in physical or whether it is done by a lot of techniques involving the computers, and softwares have been developed for the reconstruction of the facial appearances as well. So all of these basically come into play. Now, the reconstruction of the facial appearance from the skull. So this basically shows the reconstruction that basically depends upon the methods of the Gerasimov. It's a basically method that is identified. This is basically an electronical method that is being followed, and it depends upon the sculpturing ability of the operator. So in older times, of course, we didn't have the softwares and they weren't developed that much that we reconstruct the facial appearances through the computers. And so it basically wholly solely depended upon the sculpturing ability of the operator, whosoever was reconstructing the facial characteristic of the individual. Now, the reconstruction of the facial appearance from the skull. Now, pre-knowledge of the usual tissue thickness at the multitude of the points on the normal skull. So basically, whosoever is reconstructing from involving the Gerasimov method, in which the operator used to basically reconstruct the facial characteristics and the facial prominences, he should be knowing the normal indices, the normal thicknesses that are involved whenever he's reconstructing over any skull that has been found. So the pre-knowledge is very important. He should not be a layman, of course. He should have all the scientific knowledges, and he should have the knowledge, for example, for how much fatty layer is involved after the subcutaneous layer, and how much muscular layer is involved, and how are basically different ancestral determinations, they also come into play. He should have the knowledge even to those indices. And for example, as I've already discussed, the nasal indices, the femoral indices in these, and the skull indices, all of the orbital openings, they are very important whenever we are reconstructing any skull that has been found, and the ancestry has also been developed in that case. First of all, a laid modeling clay onto the known skull in layers corresponding to the standard thicknesses. So after he knows the standard thicknesses, he'll put on a modeling clay to the skull. He'll be using that. And so again, the sculpturing ability of the operator is very important. Even if he has the background knowledge and he hasn't the ability to sculpt it, that is very important. He loses the basic identification to the skull. Now, more imaginative modeling added to humanize the basic shape. So it's very important. You have to use your imagination as well, and you have to add on to these features whatever previous knowledge, whatever background knowledge that you have. Even then, you have to stick on to that knowledge. So this is basically this Gerasimov method. Even it has its own negative points as well. What are they? Basically, it's basically the lack of knowledge about the eyes, the lack of knowledge about the nose and the lips, the ears and the head hair. So it's very important that you have these indices on your hand, and that is how you basically sculpt your model or sculpt your clay. So here basically it is shown you have a skeletalized skull. It doesn't have any soft tissue parts on it. And then you put on your clay for the eyes that are put in the orbital openings. And then you have the muscular ridges are there, the muscular prominences are there. You try to put on some mass for the muscles as well, around the nasal apertures, around the orbital openings as well. And then you move on to the skin and the subcutaneous tissues. You have already basically determined what type of ancestry this skull is belonging to. So you'll be putting on all of that the skin color. For example, in this diagram, if he has assessed it's a negroid skull, then he'll be basically sculpturing in that way as well. So the previous knowledge is very important, but the defects and the negative points are already there in this Gerasimov method. And so that was the reason basically there was a second method, which is basically the Karen Price in CariDef. So it's the reconstruction of the facial appearance from the skull using a CariDef method. So in CariDef method, basically to create face on two-dimensional base provided by the skull profile, knowledge of the tissue thickness is already there. And we had the knowledge in that Gerasimov method, that is the base scale. You must be having the knowledge for the muscles, for the subcutaneous tissues as well, and you have to get along with that. The use of the computer graphic techniques. So the softwares have been devised in this CariDef method, and that is how these skull appearances are made, the reconstructions are done. Obviously, it's much easier, and we don't need the sculpturing ability. We don't need the background defects of the lips, eyes, and nose, and the ears that were found in the previous method. The use of devices. So a lot of devices are also used along with the softwares in these methods. So in this section, basically, we dealt with how are we going to reconstruct a face. The methods are very important. When we basically compare the Gerasimov method with the CariDef method, the better method is basically the CariDef method because it has much lower chances for negative false or false results that are found more in the Gerasimov method, because it also needs the sculpturing ability of the operator, which cannot be found in all the operators, even if he has the background knowledge. So it's very important that we basically stick to the identification of the person. The facial appearance is, as I've already emphasized on the importance of the facial appearance, because whenever we are going to identify a person, the facial characteristics are the mainstay to it. We even have to get back to the ancestry of the person, and we even have to get back to the identification of the person in a lot of crime investigation cases. So I hope you want to learn more about this as well. So do watch the other sections of this lecture as well. Thank you for watching sqadia.com.